third element of a successful campaign is you have to be talking about the issues that really matter to voters. You have to know what the election is about. And I think this election in 2012 is about jobs, education, and reform. You know, you heard on the news this morning or yesterday that the state unemployment rate is now officially at 8.2%. Hooray. But then step back and think about that for a minute. This is the highest level of unemployment we've seen over an extended period of our lifetime. This 8.2% is the lowest unemployment has been officially since February of 2009, 3 years ago. And if people forget, recessions usually don't create unemployment that high for that long. You have to go back to the Great Depression to find a period of high unemployment that has lasted this long. But here's the other thing. It's not the actual measure of the real measure of unemployment, because that only counts people who are unemployed and collecting benefits. It doesn't count people who are too proud to take benefits, or people who take a temp job while they continue to look for a full-time job, or people who are working part-time, looking for full-time work. That unemployment rate, which is called the U6 unemployment rate, is around 17%. And that is why state government must be relentlessly focused on helping to reduce unemployment. And the way we should do that is not by raising taxes, which has been frequently proposed the last couple of years. You may remember the income tax proposal. But rather should be focused on reducing the cost of running a business, or a nonprofit employer for that matter. There's a lot of great nonprofit employers in our state who employ a lot of people. But for all of them, for-profit and nonprofit alike, it's very expensive to employ people and to create jobs in this state. We have some of the highest unemployment insurance premiums in America, some of the most expensive workers' comp benefits in America, a very heavy regulatory burden, and of course, the distinction of having the only state-level gross receipts tax, the B&O tax. All of that is in need of reform. We need to break the state monopoly and allow competition for workers' compensation and industrial insurance. We're one of only 4 states where the state continues to monopolize workers' comp. The other 46 states have moved away from a state monopoly because they realize that competition is good, it lowers costs, it gives employers and employees alternatives and options. We need to reform the regulatory burden that we impose on every activity in this state. We make it so expensive to do everything in this state, so uncertain. And we can do that by putting new people in charge of the agencies who are tasked with taking the same kind of zero-based budgeting approach to regulation that we're going to be taking to the spending. Everything should be on the table for review. There should be no sacred cows. We should be thinking about how we can protect public values more efficiently on a more streamlined basis. For example, by integrating and harmonizing state, local, and federal requirements wherever possible. Instead of what we do now, which is to take whatever the federal requirement is, for example, for environmental protection, and make it even harder under state law. That's actually a policy at the Department of Ecology. You take the federal standard and you make it even harder, so that we can say we did. That doesn't make sense to me. We need B&O tax help, particularly for small businesses. If we take 0.5% of state revenue, we can dedicate it to reducing or eliminating the B&O tax burden on over 100,000 small businesses simply by raising the threshold at which you have to start paying the B&O tax. If we centralize the collection of B&O tax, businesses will only have to file one B&O tax return instead of having to file a separate return in every single jurisdiction where they have a customer or client. Some small businesses point out that they spend more to prepare a return for a particular city than the amount of tax they're paying to that city, which just doesn't make sense. Number 2, education. Our K-12 system and our higher education system are not getting it done for us. Even though we've doubled the amount we spend per child in constant dollars since 1980, we continue to rank in the bottom third of states for on-time high school graduation. We continue to be a state with a huge achievement gap between low-income kids and average Washington State students on tests of reading and math and science. We're one of the only states in the country where the achievement gap is not only huge, like 20 points on 4th grade reading, but it's actually getting bigger. We have 1/3 of all 3rd graders who cannot read at grade level, and over half of children of color who are in 3rd grade cannot read at grade level. We have half of kindergartners showing up not ready for kindergarten. We don't offer enough vocational and technical skills training for our high school students. And so we have this huge demand for skilled workers, but 60,000 skilled positions in our state are unfilled today because the companies cannot find enough skilled workers to come in and work, for example, as machinists. We have a high percentage of students graduating from high school who cannot do first-year community college math or English or both. 55% of community college first-year students and technical college first-year students have to take remedial math or remedial English. And if you look at all college students, including the four-year universities, it's 37% that cannot do first-year math or English and have to take remedial courses. We're spending a fortune on remediating the deficiencies of the K-12 system for the kids who graduate from high school, to say nothing of the 25 or 30% who aren't graduating or aren't graduating on time. This means we first and foremost have to reform and innovate. In President Obama's race to the top, we came in near the bottom. Why did that happen? Well, for example, we do not permit a single public charter school to exist in our state. We're one of a handful of states which bans charter schools in any form. Other states, more than 40 of them, not only have charter schools, but many of them are expanding the number of public charter schools to create alternatives and options for parents and kids, to create models that work for those kids, to create competition, frankly. And it's crazy that we will not permit a single public charter school in our state. We also need to think about how we fund public education. If you look at the state budget in the mid-'80s for all education, preschool to graduate school, it accounted for 2/3 of the state general budget. Today it's about half. That's an enormous difference in a $32 billion biennial budget. We need to reprioritize more of the existing state budget towards education, and we need to capture the lion's share of new state revenues that come in as the tax revenues grow over time and prioritize those towards education. You can't get there overnight, but over time we need to move back towards that, aiming for that 2/3 number instead of just half. What would you do with that money? First of all, it doesn't do any good to spend money on an unreformed system. We have to reform and innovate. That's key. But secondly, there are things we don't do now or don't do enough of that really do work, that aren't so much in need of reform as they are in need of funding. For example, there are 10,000 to 20,000 low-income school children in our state, or low-income 3- and 4-year-olds in our state, who can't get into preschool. They're low-income, but they cannot get into Head Start. And that's a real problem. In East Yakima, 93% of 5-year-olds arriving for kindergarten aren't ready for kindergarten. And most of them, many of them, cannot get into preschool. There just aren't enough slots. Number two, we should fund all-day kindergarten. Right now, parents are required to pay for all-day K if they want their child to go for the second half of the day. All-day kindergarten works. It helps kids catch up, keep up, and be ready for the rest of their primary grades. Number three, we should be inviting nonprofit groups like the Boys and Girls Clubs into our schools, opening those school buildings up, and providing after-school programming, tutoring, mentoring, sports, robotics, math, chess club, etc. They're very expensive facilities, these buildings. Let's use them until 5 o'clock. Let's not send any child home to an empty house after the school bell rings. Let's bring the nonprofit groups and volunteers in. There would be more people volunteering in our schools if the opportunities existed to come in and work with children. Let's have a longer school year for kids who are behind. Why do we take children who are behind at the end of the school year and send them home? Those kids typically are not the kids who are going to be in an enriched environment over the summer. They will come back in September even farther behind than they were before. So let's address that. Let's provide more vocational and technical skills training in our high schools. And let's provide more science, technology, engineering, and math for our high school students who are university bound. Boeing estimates that 12,000 to 14,000 of its professional engineers are eligible to retire in the next 5 years. We're not producing anywhere near the number of engineering graduates to fill those jobs. And that's also a problem, a part of the problem with our higher education system. It has been decimated over the last 20 years, especially in the last several years, when the University of Washington and Washington State University each lost half of their state support. In only the past 3 years, The UW and WSU have lost 50% of their state support. That's why tuition has gone through the roof. We can address that if we reprioritize education within our existing state budget, which means making some tough choices and not allowing other parts of the budget to grow as fast. And we prioritize state growth and revenue towards education. On average, over the next 10 to 20 years, state revenue growth will be 9% a biennium. That means the state budget, on average, will double every 16 years. So where do you want that 100% growth in the state budget to go? I suggest a lot of it, a disproportionately large amount of it, ought to go into education that's been reformed, which is innovative, which is providing the courses that our kids need. Third issue is reforming state government. I've been privileged to work leading one of the larger agencies of state government for the last almost 8 years now, 7.5 years. I'm a real fan of state employees that I work with. They're great. They work hard. But it's a very challenging environment in state government in general because everything's wrapped around seniority and job classification and union contracts and civil service work rules. And it's very demoralizing for a hard charger to be sitting next to someone who's barely getting by, and they both get paid exactly the same simply because they've been in the job the same number of years and have the same job classification. In the Attorney General's office, we have a system called performance management, created by the Department of Personnel. We were the first agency to adopt it back in '06. And it allows us to reward people, to compensate our staff based on performance, not just based on seniority. And until the legislature swept the budget savings I was using to fund the $500 awards I would give people at the end of the year if they hit all of their marks, if they achieved what they set out to do in their performance plan at the beginning of the year, until we did that, we were successfully shifting the focus of compensation away from merely seniority into performance. We have the highest employee satisfaction of any large agency of state government, according to the State Department of Personnel. We have steadily rising client satisfaction scores. We have 15% fewer people than we did 4 years ago, and fewer people working in my office than we did when I became Attorney General in 2005. And we're able to accomplish all of that because we have a culture of high expectations, high performance, and in which we, the leaders of the agency, serve everyone else as servant leaders, and in which we systematically engage and empower every person in our office to help improve the office. We've been through 4 rounds of quality improvement, the latest round focusing on lean principles. In the 4th round, my staff gave me 463 ideas for saving money, reducing waste, increasing efficiency. That's the kind of office we have. That's the kind of office every agency of state government ought to be. And we need that.